Okay, this is the LTS working group meeting for March 21st, 2016. I've got quite a few items to go through, so let's go ahead and we're getting on through it. The first one, it has to do with the backporting of the new buffer APIs. Pull requests, there's quite a few pull requests out there, but the background is we introduced the new buffer APIs, constructor APIs, the alloc, unsafe, and from into master. There's a pull request to get those new APIs into version 5, and I've also opened up pull requests to get the zero fill buffers command line flag added to v4, 0.12, and 0.10. And then there's an open question about whether we also want to bring the new APIs themselves back, and if we do, would we just bring it to version 4, or would we also bring it to 12 and 10? So wanted to get some feedback on that. What does everyone think? Let's split it up. So we have the zero fill buffers command line flag. What that does is when that's set, it zero fills all the buffers by default, even just on the existing buffer and slow buffer constructors. And then these additional APIs, they do not change the functionality of existing constructors at all, and the deprecation. The docs-only deprecation of those existing constructors would not be backported. It's just the addition of the new function, so it would be backported as a semver minor. Any thoughts?
Probably don't backport the API to 0.10 or 0.12. That doesn't really seem fitting.
But version 4 you're fine with?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the main advantage is that allows people to write code that will already take advantage of them without waiting, right?
Yeah.
And it seems reasonable to me anyway to do that in 4. It's not so it doesn't break anything for anybody existing, but just gives some extra functionality.
And what about the zero fill buffers command line flag?
So that actually now does change the behavior by basically saying, okay, we're going to buy default zero fill, but only if you turn on the flag.
No, that's you can turn on the flag and then it will zero fill. It's the opposite way around.
Right, okay. No change, but once you turn on the command line, it does zero fill.
Yeah. That should definitely go into v4. The older branches, I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion.
I think at least as far as being responsive to the public request for that additional security, even though it is a well-documented issue, been around for a while, and the security risk is actually fairly minimal. So I think it's low impact. I think having it there at least addresses the people, the concern of the people who are asking for it.
Yeah, and I think if you're doing one, they kind of logically go together, right? So,
I mean, for 0.12 and 0.10, we're just going to be adding it in like a minor, right?
Yes.
Like,
For patch, it just goes in as a patch. Right. We can't do minor bumps there.
Yeah, well, stuff like that's been added to like those branches before, so I don't think it's a problem. To be clear, I don't really think it's a problem in v4 either. Like, I'm happy to land minors in v4, but I know some people are afraid of minor version number bumps and stuff, so.
I think I definitely agree with at least bringing the new APIs back to version 4, not bringing those back to 0.10 or 0.12, and going ahead and getting the new command line flag all the way back to 10. I'm wondering though if we should at least if we should bring it to the full CTC and just see if anyone has any objections, but currently the bias would be to go ahead and land them. Does that seem accurate?
Wait, land which?
The zero fail buffers, PRs in version 4, 0.12, and 0.10, and only the API backports to version 4. Not counting version 5. Version 5 would get both.
I don't really see the need for it unless something's like controversial. I think it was kind of implied that the flag would probably land in all versions, but I don't think we would land any API in the 0.x branches. So if you want to do that, I'd probably say bring it to the CTC, but
I don't think I'd go through the trouble of backporting the APIs to 0x.
we're gonna need a minor version bump. Like the only problem with it in V4 is we might need to wait a while to actually get it in, I think, unless you want to do a minor again, but that might be bad for messaging. In which case we could just put the flag and the APIs in one shot. It doesn't change much, I think.
Miles, do we have any other significant Semver miners stacked up for V4 currently?
I believe right now, I'd have to double check. There's the one Semver miner that we're trying to get people to contribute to. My internet's running terribly slow right now, so I'm not able to look it up. But there was one Semver miner that was sitting that had to do with exposing some stuff for profiling. It's the V2 profiling support. I think I found it. Yeah, so here I'll just post that in the Hangout. So this is one that's a miner that needs to get rebased and just needs work done on it. No one's been picking that up. Other than that,
yeah, that missed the cut for the last LTS, last minor bump, didn't it?
yes, it did. And then if I just search for Semver miner and closed, we've got nothing that's closed, and then I see the V2 and profiling support and the backport of zero buffers being like the only things that are really like explicitly in the backlog right now. Otherwise, we got everything else.
So, how about this as a proposal? Since technically the new buffer APIs are not going out until version 6. How about we hold off on landing anything in version 5 for or the 0x until 6 is also cut. And that way we can deliver we can see if we can do a version 4 bump and a version 5 bump along with the version 6 that includes these new APIs. That way they're out there all at once.
It's only like a month out anyway, seems fine to me.
They're already in master, so people can try them out, and we'll get some sort of baking time between now and then.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I think just to be safe, we should just make sure it's discussed on the CTC call this week, just so everyone is what's being planned. And
I'm not sure if we heard the end of that. I think your connection cut out a bit, James.
Yeah, I didn't get the end either.
Okay.
May have lost James.
Yeah, probably. Do we just want to move on then? Does anyone have anything of note for update npm 2.x and 10 point and 0.10?
Not particularly. It sounds like we'll wait for the latest versions that are going to come downstream at the end of this week and roll those in next week.
Okay. Fair enough. I don't really. There's no like notes document for this, is there? So I don't really have anything to note down. We'll just tell James when he gets back, I guess. Okay. Node.js LTS. Support for V8 for Node's LTS releases. Is anyone who tagged this?
I tagged it,
Okay.
and we have Michael from the VA team on the meeting as well. So I'll let him do the talking. Let me give a brief overview. So basically, Michael and the rest of the VA team and us have been talking about if there's something, if there's any way VA team can help with the Node.js LTS branch. So there's a few ideas that they had that Michael wanted to discuss, and I'll hand it over to Michael.
Okay, thanks Ali for the introduction. Yeah, I think this was already introduced in the latest CTC meeting by Seth or by Ali, as far as I know. So that's why we put it on the channel for that LTS working group meeting today. So we were brainstorming a little bit, and we were thinking about helping you with identifying security patches, essentially. And so essentially it's about we want to help you with the LTS releases that you're having, and this means we obviously also need your input. We were brainstorming inside of the team already how we can envision something like that. Should I elaborate on that, or do you have some specific questions already?
I'd say, yes, please, and elaborate on what
Okay.
you have and get more.
So as far as I know, one of the pain points is that we are more or less freezing our abandoned branches that we are having. So this means when you are creating an LTS release, the V8 release that you're using for that is more or less already abandoned for us. More or less means I think there's an overlap of a few weeks and that's it. Which means that we are not accepting fixes, for example, onto the branch, or bug fixes, security fixes, performance fixes, whatever, because we are not testing it anymore. So there would be a way that we can unfreeze these branches and provide a little bit of test coverage. So you don't need to support, you don't need to have floating patches there.
Yeah, part of the problem that I see happening is that, I mean, the LTS branch that we have has a copy of V8 4.5, which is pretty diverged from upstream, because upstream is not doing any patches whatsoever. Yet we do backport patches and float patches. So the two things that are missing there are, well, we don't have So there's no single source of truth for 4.8, 4.5. And the second, it would be nice to get some code reviews from the VA team and when backporting fixes. So those are the concrete, like very concrete advantage I see of being able to use upstream branches rather than our own.
Exactly. Thanks for making it more concrete.
But I think that's good. I guess it's, today we kind of have the mandate that if you want to land one of those floating patches, you have to get it into master. I guess the change that we would ask, if you're doing it for LTS, you also get it into the corresponding branch in V8. Given that. Now, how would that actually happen? Are we going to ask the individuals who contributed to master to push it back into the earlier branch, or is that something you guys are going to help with, or just sort of what would the expected mechanics around that?
So in general, we have some guidance for merging and patching. So I would say it should be similar to that one.
So let me elaborate a little bit from the Node's perspective. So the way the policy that Node has is that we do not accept patches to V8 unless V8 has accepted them in the stable or tip of the tree or somewhere more recent, right? So for somebody to, so if we are even going to consider a backport, it has to be in V8 already. So the individual who's trying to contribute a patch, we already are asking them to go fix it in V8. And then we backport that a copy of that patch into onto Node.js repository. So I guess the workflow, the way I imagine it would change is, first of all, once they've ported it to, once they've gotten it implemented in V8, it would be a V8 process to get it backported to the, let's say, the LTS branch for Node. And on the Node side, it would be just bring in the latest update of the LTS branch.
Right. I was just more asking because I know we've done some cherry picking back to those branches. And it's a little bit of a different process, and I think we've run into issues occasionally. And so I think we just need to have, I guess, good instructions for how you do that.
Do you mean cherry picking onto our branches or on the Node.js clones?
The cherry picking onto the old branches.
Yeah, I see. Well, generally we have some how you're going to do the merges and cherry picking. So we can do it a very similar thing, like Ali already pointed out. And we are also probably also going to do some basic testing, so at least compilation, unit test, stuff like that, for these abandoned branches. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my other question. I know where we look for the current branches, like the.
Yeah, exactly.
How about
the same
older one?
Yeah, the idea is that in order to get some basic test coverage from our side is to have the branch builders that we are currently running for the stable and the beta branch we are having, also do them for all the other branches too. If there is some change on a branch, we are going to run the branch builders, which do some very basic testing.
Yeah. Okay, so they would just show up in the same places as the current.
Yeah, exactly. Not really sure how it will look in the end, but that's the idea. So the same thing, the same builders and tests that are running for stable and beta should run for the other branches.
Yeah.
This also means obviously that you only need to use code review, for example, the Chromium code review for doing all the patches, and don't need to jump around between GitHub and code review and stuff like that. So it should make it easier to do the administrative side of this too.
So I guess some of the questions we'll, have to ask on this one would be, so right now 4.5 is very different. So on the V8 side, we don't have a lot of patches that Node has been floating. So what do we do? Do we take all those patches and bring the V8 version of 4.5 in sync with what Node has, or how would we proceed?
I guess, have you looked at them and do you think all of them can go back?
We can probably take a look, but that also raises another question, right? So we'll have to have a process. So how do we resolve issues where the VA team decides that this is way too risky to go back? I mean, that's possibly a point of contention, because I mean, and I would expect that we would want to understand the VA team's point of view as being pretty authoritative on that matter. But that's going to be something that's different from our current process.
Yeah, I mean, if I can see it becoming an issue primarily if it's something that we've already landed, that is problematic. Going forward, if there's something we want to land that the V8 team chooses not to, then we can treat it basically as a floating patch as we have been, right? So I don't see that moving forward as being any kind of issue. Because the real question would be: is there anything that we've already landed that the V8 team doesn't like or wouldn't?
So I can take a action item to go compile a list and then review with the VA team and I'd come back with an answer.
Yeah, how many branches are we speaking of, and what is the oldest branch? 4 or 5?
For LTS, it would be the 4.x. The 4.x is the one you want to look at.
Yeah, so that would be V8 4.5.
4.5. Okay, yeah. I see.
I mean, we have older ones in LTS, but I don't think it's worth going back more than that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to have a look how much back into time we can support something like that, because we recently changed something in the test infrastructure, and I don't know if it is supported on 4.5, for example. But I need to have a look.
Yeah, I'm just not sure if there. I mean, for anything that's in 0.10, 0.12, I just think it's going back way too far, and it's just not going to be any kind of value. And
yeah, no, I think I agree. It's like going forward is what makes sense. I think 4 is close enough that it's probably worth looking.
yeah, and then we even have to decide. I mean, how far back and forth are we going to go, or do we just kind of snapshot it at a point in time? So we kind of have to look at that as well.
I guess for the consideration is if we don't backport things, does that then make it harder to make new things go back, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like if you're not going to put them back, maybe we just start at, you know, 4.5 if that's what's in 6, right? We start with the approach.
I guess one thing I don't have a good sense of, and I mean, Michael, this would probably be something great. I mean, as part of the analysis, is how out of sync our 4.5 is from the 4.5 in your tree.
My guess would be there's a dozen or so floating patches that we have.
Okay.
And I guess it's a curious thing is, you know, I wonder if some of those are things that don't make sense in the more general case, but are specific to Node, or they're all just general patches we just didn't put back because we couldn't.
I don't have an answer off the top of my head. I can bring a list for the next time around, but yeah, from what I remember, none of them were. I mean, some of them were things that Node cared more about, but
Right.
there was nothing that was out of the ordinary. So I didn't think there was anything exceptional that would be highly controversial.
Okay.
And so, just in the notes here, just documenting. So I would say Ali and the team to investigate
delta existing delta between v4.5 and v4 currently versus v4.5 in v8's tree.
Yeah.
And to see if there are issues with any of the floating patches. We've already landed. Then we can have that on the agenda for the meeting in 2 weeks. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay, we had also some other ideas which were hovering around security bugs. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that or discuss it in 2 weeks or something like that. I don't know what's else on the agenda.
Well, if they're security related, what we want to do is have a private conversation as part of the security process to review those to see how much of an issue they are.
Well, I don't think it was specific ones that exist. It's about how to handle ones that, new ones that come up. And it was around opening CVEs for them or doing other things to make them more visible to us.
Exactly.
Oh,
so essentially now Chrome is issuing CVEs, which we are piggybacking on, obviously, because we are having the same release cycle. And as far as I know, Node is also issuing CVEs, but for abandoned branches for us. But probably we will also want to publish, if we are merging something on an official Chrome V8 branch, we also need to put it into our release notes for that old branch. So we also need to work out something to harmonize the whole CVE strategy.
Right.
With Node.
So first instinct would be just handle this through our existing security process. I mean, if something comes up on your end, just make sure that security at nodejs.org is copied on the information.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of go from there to evaluate and see what needs to land where.
Exactly, that's how it currently works. And as far as I know, you're also getting information ahead of the rest of the people.
We linked in a few people like Ben Nordhaus into the emailing list, I think.
Yeah. So. But we also should think about the opposite direction. So if you find something, as far as I know, Node is also issuing CVEs, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if there is some major security breakage in a branch that you, for example, use in an LTS release, we also need to get notified somehow, because in order to support CVEs release correctly, we need to issue release notes and stuff like that. And if we are accepting it on our official branches, we need to release some information about it, which you can also reference and stuff like that.
I don't know, James, we need to maybe start a discussion on the security repository about this.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we can. Let's just circle it up with the security team and just see if there's anything, what we need to do to kind of make sure that's worked into the policy and the process.
Okay. Do you want me to open an issue on that front?
Yeah, if you would.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So I'm looking. We have about 15 minutes left. So, is there anything else on the V8 side?
I think that were the main topics. I mean, despite the obvious ones that we want to improve marking of interesting, or giving you a hint if there might be some interesting backboard. Oh, Because I think Ali already talked about the LKGR integration pod that we're running, probably.
Well, thank you very much for everything. Can we ask, for you to join us in 2 weeks for kind of the additional review on this?
No, thanks. Don't mention it.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and move on. Got a few more items. Tracking backporting of the path optimizations. So the background on this is in master there were a number of PRs that were landed. Optimizing the code in the path module. There ended up being quite a few regressions from that needed to be fixed. There's an open question about whether we should backport these to version 4. But like I said, there have been a high number of regressions. So I know, Miles, you wanted to have this on the discussion here to see if we wanted to backport these. Do you want to give a little more background?
Yeah, so the path changes came in. The amount of churn is non-trivial, but the amount of regressions are also non-trivial. I think the last time we tried to move something like this that had a whole bunch of regressions, we got bit pretty hard by missing one of them. So my thought process here was, let's just keep track of everything that's going on and keep track of all the regressions that are happening with these changes. And then if we find, like, my thought process on it is to actually hold off on merging, but keep track of all the regressions. And if we find at any time between now and before we move to maintenance mode that we're starting to have a ton of pain with path, then we'll have a full documentation of, like, here are all the things that we need to merge to kind of get back to some sort of place where it's not going to be so painful.
Right.
Sounds like a pretty good idea to me.
Yeah, I'm a +1 for that. Like, let's not do anything that's going to hurt us until we have to.
Yep. Agreed.
So the only thing out of this that I would like to see more discussion around, and maybe this makes sense for the working group and maybe not, but is just something more codified that we can do to keep track of that. Right now, I've just been keeping issues open. Is not really the best way of doing it. Also, whether or not these commits should be kept as LTS watch or they should be all labeled don't land. I have a bit of a fear of things ending up in, like, kind of the don't land graveyard, and then they become hard to find later. But if we can find a way to officially embed metadata that ties together these, like, these commits that rely on other commits, then we can maybe avoid having to do as much, like, maintenance inside of the repo and inside of issues.
Yeah. I'd say the only challenge with that is that it becomes very difficult over time to track what changes depend on other previous changes. For things like reverts or fixing a regression, I think it becomes much easier. So if we know that a particular PR is a fix for a regression for another PR, then I think I think as part of our just commit guidelines, we need to have, or landing PR guidelines, we need to have some additional piece of standard metadata in there that links to the original PR that caused the issue.
Yeah, but you'll eventually get to a point where you'll eventually get to this point, though, that it's like, did that PR actually, like, cause it? Because you might need to go back, like, really far, and, like, you might not know if like, before some refactor it existed or not.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. So like, if we're gonna do that, there probably needs to be, like, either more clear or have, like, some sort of time frame associated with it.
Yeah. And it's just going to get to, I mean, that gets to the point where it's just, it's going to be difficult to manage and maintain. We definitely need something to help correlate these so we know which ones go together and which ones don't. As far as the don't land issue, what I'm wondering is, we already have a bunch of labels, but so we have the LTS watch, which says, okay, this thing is it's being considered for landing. More than likely, it will land. I'm wondering if we need to do like another label that basically says we're not landing this currently, but it's still on the map. So it's somewhere between don't land and LTS watch.
We could do a regression watch, LTS regression watch or something.
Mm. At the same time, then I don't know. I think we should expect that in like some respect, the LTS branches should end up looking like our new LTS branches should end up looking like V10, for example, where say we don't land something like that, like there's a decent amount of chance that if no one has reported that some bug exists on 0.10, but it's reported on a newer version, that probably means it doesn't exist on the other version, and we might not need to bother trying to patch it because, again, there's going to be like a point where the delta is large enough that it's not practical to look to like look at master to see what might be broken in the LTS branch, if that makes any sense.
I think once an LTS branch moves into the maintenance phase, I agree. Once, while it's still in the active LTS, I think we need to, when something is reported, we need to at least go back and investigate proactively if it needs to be applied.
Yeah, but our active LTS phase is actually very long, and even if you look at 0.12, 0.12 is not that terribly outdated from Node v1, and it's already very hard to do something like that, and very hard to know what's changed in between. So I don't think that's actually entirely practical. I think it's more of a sort of incremental over time thing, and then once maintenance hits, we're like, okay, we don't do that anymore at all.
But for something like the path, which is a performance optimization, it's not a bug. We're just making, we're making things work better. But in this case, it ended up introducing a number of regressions that had to be fixed. I think in general, I know Rod's perspective in the past has been, we need to be very conservative about pulling these performance improvements back, specifically because of these, the possibility of these kind of regressions. I think we need to be a lot more conservative in our approach for these kind of changes, and I think this idea of a regression watch label makes a ton of sense. If it's something we think we could probably pull back, but want to have it sit for a while.
James, if you'd like, I can come up with a straw man proposal for this week, and then we can maybe make like an issue on the LTS branch or something, or maybe document it in the LTS repo. I'll make a PR, and then we can start kind of tearing that apart, work on something more less abstract.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah, because I think the case in this one, it's like, I'd agree that you don't want to pull all your performance things back necessarily because of the risk. I think the flip side was you don't want to get too divergent.
Yeah.
So it's more of a, if you're diverging and it's causing you so much work, then you might consider pulling it back. Whereas if it just never becomes an issue in terms of the divergency, then it's, probably fine to just say, well, yeah, one of the reasons you upgrade to the newer version is because you get better performance.
That, and I think that we end up running the risk of this idea that we pull everything back in order to avoid the divergence runs a risk of pulling back too many of these regressions. I think there's something to be said about going ahead and allowing the divergence to occur.
Yeah,
so on the behavior at a particular level, making it more of a known entity there, right? So I think. I just think we need to be, rather than this idea of pulling back all of the performance improvements, we just have a bias towards not pulling it back until it can be proven that there's no regression.
Yeah, I agree, and even maybe not until we think it's causing grief in terms of other backports, right?
Yeah.
Like those two tests would be a reasonable, one you're pretty confident it's not going to regress you, and two, there's some reason why you need to, right? Which is that it's causing too much work for other pack forces.
Yeah.
I'll throw out one more thing that I'm just thinking about right now is like in theory we could almost even develop a tag per each of these major events. Like, I mean, thinking about it right now, in the amount of time we've been doing LTS, there's been these path changes, there's changes to util, but there's not like so many. Like there's maybe a handful. And what I'm imagining right now would be really useful is not just the things that are fixing regressions, but for example, if we have changes to tests or if we have changes to anything that touches that code that's not being backported, those usually get a do not land tag. So we don't want to end up like partially taking like a feature. So it seems to me like kind of just tracking kind of the network of code that is divergent is important there.
Yeah. Yeah, like you're saying something like you could have like a path not landed tag or something.
Yeah, exactly. And like just everything that deals with that, we just throw it into that bucket, and then when we need to deal with that bucket, we can. But at least it's documented.
I think if we're doing that as an issue in the LTS repository, then I would say yes. So we can, when one of these things comes up, we create an issue and we use that to track all of the related issues. The idea of using a label for that is just kind of gives me the willies, because we end up with a lot of, over time we'll end up with a lot of extraneous dead labels. We already have quite a few.
Okay.
But so if we had an issue like using the path as an example, we have this huge optimization that is a question mark. We would just go ahead and create an issue in the LTS repo used to track that and give some criteria for, okay, what would we need for this to actually land, and what are the regressions that have happened, occurred because of it, right?
Yeah, I think I agree the issue makes sense because you probably also need to be specific to the release. Like it has to be like path not landed V4. Because then once you hit V6, that stuff no longer applies.
Can we discuss the other three things quickly before the end of this?
Yep. Okay, so the next one is, excuse me, sorry. Debugger introduced exec method for debugger, issue number 1491. Let's see.
Seems low risk because I doubt anyone's depending on programmatically running the debugger.
I think, are any of the like top debuggers that people are using that are not just in the command line using the debugger programmatically?
I don't think so. How I understand the debugger is the debugger basically is one of those that just ships with Node, but I might be wrong.
I'm pretty sure, but I could be wrong, that a lot of them, because we saw those debugger regressions before, the debugger creates like a socket, and then a debugger client can connect to that and then has an API to communicate with it. And I believe a large portion of those debugger clients are built on top of that and then are just communicating over the socket. But I'm not sure how many of them are maybe like spinning up the actual debugger instance manually.
So there's a little bit of a confusion here because we expose a debug. We can just expose a V8 debugging instance, and then we also have a built-in debugger that can connect to that instance like userland ones can. And it's which thing this is in. I think this is commands for the built-in debugger. It adds a new command to it, which means it shouldn't touch the actual API underneath.
Shouldn't be any actual. Nobody in userland can have their own commands here. They don't have any. There shouldn't really be any actual impact. Michael, do you have any thoughts on this? Michael Dawson?
Yeah, no, I don't have, no. I'm just looking at the change itself, just to see if we can derive it from that.
I'm with Jeremiah. This one seems safe to me.
Okay, I can add the LTS watch label to it, and we can have it staged for the next SEM reminder bump that we do to LTS.
Sounds good to me.
That's good. Any objections? Right, so I think we're good on that one. The next one is refactoring timers. Jeremiah?
So the idea for this refactors timers thing is ultimately a future thing anyways. It's sort of the change was sort of like born of the thought that we should have this stuff more solidly for the future, and if it performs better also, then hey, great. So on that, like, I don't really mind if it doesn't make it back. On the other side, it like 99% of that patch is using existing code, so it's very low risk, I think. Like, the implementation was switched to the implementation that userland timers use.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a candidate for that same discussion we were having earlier, until it becomes an issue in terms of merging, hold off.
Yeah, I think it probably would.
Jeremiah, if we're going to do that, would you be able to take lead on creating an issue and just collecting all the different issues and pull requests around that?
Yeah, if that's what we're going to be doing, I can sort of, I don't know, figure that out with whatever process we come up with, I guess.
What I'm thinking, I mean, so this is already landed in master. It's already gone out in 5, right?
Yeah, it went out in 5 like last week.
Okay, so going back to the earlier discussion about the buffer API changes, if we wanted to look at a minor bump in mid to late April, that gives plenty of time to see if there's going to be any kind of regressions in this. So we can use this to kind of test this proposed process for tracking things. And if there are no regressions by the time we do that first release candidate or whatever for the new V4, then I'd say let's go ahead and pull it.
Just as a note, it's not specifically Semver minor, but if by what you mean by that's going to be the next LTS release anyway, then yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be LTS releases, like patch releases between now and then. But I was thinking, I mean, this one doesn't seem like super critical. It's something that'd be nice to go ahead and to pull back. I'm thinking it would give us a way of kind of working through this process a little bit more.
Right, sure, yeah. Again, like, I don't really mind it if or when it lands, so.
Okay.
And then one last thing, domains, something.
Yeah, so I can speak to this. This was something that was landed by Mr. D. Jules a while back onto master. I'm not sure if it's made it into a release yet because it's Semver Major. But there was, just discussion about whether this should land or not land, because it was originally tagged as like this is something that should land for all branches. So just wanted to get people's opinion on it.
When was this tagged Semver Major? It was tagged Semver. Oh. I'm just looking right now if it's actually landed. No, it has not landed on stable.
think it's in the V6 proposal right now is the only place where it is.
If it's not landing on V5, we shouldn't be
Even considering.
considering it. So Rod says on this, for what it's worth, I think we can be slightly more flexible with the Semver designations on V5, but it's on the LTS branches where we really have to be strict and careful. I'd be fine with this landing in V5, but happy to go the conservative option of Semver minor 2. I don't know, no one's like argued for this to even land in something in V5, so.
Yeah. I don't even think Julian is arguing too much for it. I mean, I think it's something that he would like to have. So I'm not sure how critical it is.
Yeah, I think I'd lean towards not including it, and then if there's an argument for why.
Yeah. And it sounds like we're all in agreement on that point.
Yeah, I don't think we should consider it unless it's being considered for V5, so.
So should I remove the LTS watch labels, add a don't land label, and just document our decision?
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was all the items that needed. Anyone have anything else?
No, I'm gonna head out. Thanks everyone.
All right. Yep. I think we're done. Thanks everyone.
Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.